rogersarnt.
All right, guys. So, welcome to the rogersarnt podcast, where we talk all things Army, and we are live. Today, we have a special guest on the show, and I'm going to introduce you to her. Her name is Ariel Best, also known as the VA Loan Lady.
Hey guys,
Ariel, how's it going today?
can't complain. How's it going for you?
So far, so good. I appreciate you taking out the time and spreading your knowledge on this platform for all the and for the NCOs, junior NCOs, and soldiers and veterans that we have that are watching.
Absolutely.
So, what we'll start off with is we'll start off with a little bit about you, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. That work for you?
That sounds good.
All right. So, fair enough. First question is, what got you into real estate? And on top of that, what made you specialize in VA loans specifically?
I got into real estate by accident because one of my old bosses said, "Hey, you'd be good at mortgages." And I said, "Okay, I'll try it." So I did. And then I'm like, I get to work from home in my pajamas and just do math problems all day. This is awesome. So that was honestly how I got into real estate and getting specialized in VA loans. Shout out to Rocky and Toya. They were the first veteran family I ever worked with, and I butchered their loan. Absolutely butchered it. They still closed. By God, they still closed. They put up with me not knowing what I was doing. And I sat down and I was like, that was really hard. That felt like that should have been easier. And I sat down and I opened up the VA lender's handbook and I read it and I went, oh, that should have been easier. And I made it more difficult. And then I talked to a bunch of my veteran friends, and my ex at the time was a veteran. And he had told me it was a rough process. And I was like, why is this so hard? And so I just repeatedly read the handbook over and over again. And then I would start posting on Facebook being like, did you know? And then people started to ask questions. I'd go get answers, and here we are.
Oh wow! So pretty much it was an accident.
110%. It was an accident. 110%.
Okay. So being that you kind of stumbled over your first one, that kind of pushed you into reading into the handbook. So, I've speaking to you for a while previously to the show. Every question I have, you're like right on it. So, how many times do you think you've read that handbook to be able to
Uh,
be so knowledgeable like that?
I have it saved on my desktop. I have two hard copies printed, one of which has highlighter in there for like important things that I'm like, oh, okay, don't forget this. Like, there's some very interesting rules in the handbook, and honestly, I read it every day. I'm in the handbook every day. I'm reading and emailing the VA and being like, this is specifically not in the handbook. How do you want me to deal with this? This veteran wants to buy a house shaped like a shoe. It meets permitting requirements. It's allowed per local zoning. Is this veteran allowed to buy the shoe house? The VA specifically says if it's not in writing, use your best judgment. But honestly, a lot of the times that leaves a lot up to interpretation. So it's just, I'm in there all day. It's taken me 4 years to probably memorize the thing, but I have it pretty well memorized.
Fair enough. So, next question is, you went into VA loaning. So, what's your military like association? Like, are you retired? Are you in the military? Family members?
Family members. So I married and subsequently separated from a previous veteran. And then my grandfather was in the Marines. He was actually part of Expedition Deep Freeze in the 60s. So his plane was the first successful one that landed on Antarctica, and he brought back a penguin,
A whole penguin?
a live whole penguin as a pet.
Yeah. Remember, that's kind of weird. That's kind of different because everyone brings back some type of memorabilia from like Iraq, Afghanistan, but it's never live for the most part.
He was odd. He was a little odd with that one, but I guess ice would melt on the flight back. So
Yeah,
I mean, there's nothing beyond Antarctica. So
that's crazy. Oh, you're right. Uh, so so from accidentally going into being a real estate lender, going into VA loans, getting all the knowledge. How did you end up on TikTok and any other platform? Mainly TikTok, because that's where I found you at.
So I had been posting a lot of videos to Facebook and I would call them realtor recons and I would try and educate realtors. And I was to the point where I actually had licensing to teach realtors continuing education on VA loan benefits. The problem is that realtors weren't telling veterans and they wouldn't remember and they would come for the free lunch and the CE credits and then they'd leave. And then they'd call me 3 weeks later with a veteran family who was in a panic attack because Navy Federal or Veterans United, and I'm out them, I don't care. That's where I rescued most of the loans from. I was doing emergency rescue loans for veteran families or active duty families all the time. It was probably 60% of my business. And that's a stressed out, pissed off, upset, frustrated family who's probably about to be homeless, leaving a duty station or moving from a duty station, and they don't have anywhere to go. And now I have 3 weeks less than how long it normally takes to close on a house to fix the problem and close their loan. And then I also have a realtor who should have sent them to me the first time, so this didn't happen, who is breathing down my neck. And I kept on doing those and it started to burn me out. And a girlfriend of mine said, why don't you go to TikTok and post videos on TikTok? Beginning of the pandemic, locked in the house, bored. So I was like, all right, we're going to do it. And then one night I posted a video and I thought it was kind of basic fundamental information and it went viral. And I made the mistake of putting my personal cell phone number on the caption of that video. And this was before you could edit on TikTok and take that out. I was like, oh no, what did I do? And I had 767 active duty or veterans call me in one day. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure that Linktree was a savior that day. That's how I figured out Linktree and Calendly real quick. So
700. So that's specific, like 767.
I went back and pulled my phone records and I'm like, because my phone started ringing at 4 o'clock in the morning because I didn't realize how big of a reach TikTok
Everything
had at
was
the
all over.
time.
Yeah.
And so I had somebody call me from South Korea at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had somebody call me from Hawaii at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, who is this? They're like, I saw your video. I'm like, what video? It's 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
So I was blown away. I had no idea the reach that I would have. Honestly, I was like, wow, okay, cool. Let's do that again.
yeah, I was about to say so far it's worked out for you.
Yeah.
So in the beginning you said you're gonna out. So meaning that I bring that back because your your style is not the same as anyone else's as would be for real estate agent. It seems like most of the content that you post is very blunt, and I can only imagine that translate over into the real estate life. Does that hurt you or anything like that, or does it make it better to work with your veterans?
I love it much better not having to have somebody be a conduit and a filter between the information that I have that you need. There does not need to be a person there until you are ready to start house hunting. So the way it normally happens is you say, I want to buy a house, you find a realtor, the realtor sends you to a lender. The realtor shouldn't be there yet. The realtor is to help you house hunt, and you're not ready to do that until you know how much money you can spend. So when I started doing TikToks and I realized people were like, oh, can you do my loan? And I'm like, I mean, sure. Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to help. It was very odd that perfect strangers would trust me with their social security number from TikTok, but I am a licensed loan officer, so we did it securely. There's a secure portal for everything. But it made it a lot easier when I started working directly with the client, a veteran, active duty service member, whoever, prior to them saying, okay, I found the house that I love. I want to put an offer in. Are you sure? Do you know what the payment is yet? Do you know how much money you're about to spend? Do you know what your closing costs are? Do you have your closing costs? What's the game plan if you don't? Or is the seller going to pay? Like, you don't want to cram that in when you're standing in the house. You're like, I love it. And your wife is like, oh my God, can you imagine the kids in the backyard? Don't do it then. Get your numbers first. And so it made it so much easier. So much easier.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes, right?
Okay.
So let's start off with educating veterans. Where can they find additional resources or support when navigating for the VA loan process, like counseling service, education materials, things of
So
that nature?
there is a lot of materials, and what I would encourage everybody who's watching or listening to do is to make sure that the materials are coming from one of two places, starting directly with the VA. If you go to the VA website, you can type in eligibility for a VA home loan, and it will spit out the exact thing that I say on TikTok all the time. These are your terms of service. This is this, this is this. And some people don't want to read through all that because it is a lot of information. There's two different handbooks that I know of for the VA loan for two separate entire purposes. There's multiple departments for it. So start with the VA, but if you need condensed information and specific answers, There is a group that's run by a Marine veteran who is very, very strict in that group on it's only veterans or only industry professionals who have gone through testing. And the testing is so hard that I have not passed it yet. If he's watching this, I have not passed it. I'm going to get back to it, but it is so hard and so detail oriented that it makes you sit there with the handbook to get through the test, and it takes several hours. And they're not allowed to solicit in there. And the reason I suggest that group is because real estate professionals are not allowed to solicit service members in that group. It is specifically for veterans looking to get their questions answered. And here's where a lot of the problem comes in when service members are trying to get answers to questions. I'm going to use an example to relate it back to this, and we kind of talked about this before. So you have TRICARE as a active duty service member, but let's say you have to go off base or go to a civilian doctor and use your benefit TRICARE off base with a civilian service provider. Okay, so you can still use your VA benefit at a civilian service provider. It acts just like regular insurance. The same thing goes for your VA home loan benefit. You have to go through typically a civilian service provider to get it. Now, unfortunately, the handbook is not something that we are required to read as loan officers, as evidenced by my first loan. Um, so I would encourage you very strongly to start with the Vet VA group because they will not solicit you. They will give you the services to find a skilled lender, but they will not recommend one to you because they don't believe in referrals, they don't believe in kickbacks, and they don't want you to have a bad experience. They want you to be able to make an educated and informed decision. Past that, the handbook, you can also go to a VSO for counseling services specifically because there are home buyer education counseling classes specific for the VA through VSO services. So I know that active duty service members have somebody that's not technically called a VSO. I don't know what that's called for active duty.
Don't. That's why you're here.
Oh, okay. All right. That's me. Okay. So you don't have to use me. I will just tell you what the handbook says and how to interpret it. But yes, that is you want to start with somebody that's knowledgeable. Vetted VA has a bunch of knowledgeable people that will not tell you you need to use them to give you the right information.
Okay, but I do know that we do have a VSO brief that's like on the third here at Fort Cavazos. I think it's third floor, second floor on the at the Copeland Center. I do know that because when we redeployed, I specifically spoke to three gentlemen that did say the acronym is VSO.
Okay.
So they're on Fort Cavazos for those of you who are watching. All right, so now that we know where to find the information, tell the audience what is a VA loan and how does it differ from traditional mortgages, please.
Sure. So, kind of like I just explained, it is a benefit that you've earned from your service that gives you the eligibility to use it. It differs from other loan products because you have the eligibility to use your VA loan. You also have the option to use any of the other loan products to purchase a home. So, the four main loan programs are VA, USDA, FHA, and conventional. The one that is most similar as it relates to not having a down payment is USDA. That program is restricting of income and restricting of geography for where you can use that loan. If it's a USDA loan, you're meant to be out in the middle of BFE. So you can't buy in the cities with that loan. You can use your VA loan to buy in the cities. FHA and conventional require down payments. They typically, and I've actually got some scenarios that I can show, but typically the rates on conventionals are higher. Um, they also require a down payment. You're also going to have mortgage insurance. So I'll give you a couple of options just so you can kind of compare. Let's assume you're buying in Dallas, Fort Worth. The loan amount is the median sales price of 303. Your rate is going to be the same from VA to conventional with a minimum down payment of $9,000 on a conventional loan plus closing costs of $5,000. You're up to 14 on a conventional. You're at about 5,900 on a VA for closing costs because there is no down payment. We haven't even gotten to the mortgage insurance on the conventional yet, which is an additional $159 per month on top of the principal and interest, taxes, and insurance. So you're going to spend $9,000 more and $154 or $194 a month more to get a conventional loan when the appraisal processes are almost the exact same, and it's easier to qualify for a VA loan when it comes to income and credit. So it's an earned benefit, and the VA wants you to use it because it's typically the best loan program. I've only ever had one scenario, one very rare scenario where I told somebody you should do conventional instead of VA, and it was a refinance.
So it seems like the VA is like their sole purpose is to make things streamlined, and they want us to use our benefits, and they give us the max amount of what is it called, perks.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. There's no loan cap on a VA loan. So if you have all of your VA eligibility and you want to buy a $1.3 million house and you qualify for the payments, you can spend 1.3 million and no down payment is required on that home. Conventional, you would need to put 500,000 down to use a standard conventional loan or do a jumbo loan, which is a different program entirely and has worse rates and higher down payments.
Yeah, that doesn't sound appealing at all. So if I want to take advantage of this, not down payment and not the insurance, not having the insurance, like how do I determine my eligibility for that? What do I need to get?
Well, it depends on well, that depends. All right. So if you're active duty, you need to talk to a loan officer and you need to confirm that you have a COE, which is your certificate of eligibility. And I'm going to screen share if you're all right with it so everybody can see what that looks like. Just like when you get your DD 214 or your disability award letter, this is the same thing. This is a certificate that's issued by the VA to every eligible service member. So it's going to look exactly like this. This is the template. It's going to have reference number here, the name of the veteran, and the last four of the social. If you have this, you are eligible. Before anybody asks, can you lose eligibility entirely? Yes. If you are active duty and you get dishonorably discharged, you've lost your VA loan benefit forever and ever. Amen. Unless you submit an appeal. So that's number one, most important. For active duty service members, the minimum amount of time that you need to serve in order to get one of these, if you are still serving, is 90 days. Right now, we're still in a time of war, and they go based off of when declared war is going for how long you need to be in service to be eligible. So you can be in for 90 days. You're eligible as long as you get out honorably or other than honorably. You'll maintain this forever. Your VA benefit, once you've served enough time, is good forever. You have to serve your contract time. If it's anything less than 2 years as an active duty service member, it needs to be a medical separation to maintain your eligibility for your home loan benefit. And then reservist does have a different set of qualifications. For reservists, if you're currently in the reserves, you need to have 6 years in, or you need to have been activated for no less than 30 consecutive days on Title 10 or 32 orders. And I don't remember which branch, like for Coast Guard or reserves, is Title 10 versus Title 32. But either way, for both branches across the board, 30 days consecutive activation orders, stateside or deployed. That will shorten the total 6 years. So if you're in for 3 years as a reservist and you get called up to an emergency at the border, since you're near Texas, for 90 days, you now have home loan eligibility benefits. It's expedited that timeline. Same thing goes, you need to get out honorably. Reservists, other than honorably, is a disqualification from maintaining these benefits, unfortunately.
Whoa. So anything other than honorable
For a reservist or a
for a
national
reservist?
guard,
Yes.
it has to be honorable discharge or medical separation.
Oh dear. Okay.
Now,
So go.
there is an appeal process. So I hate to bring up anything related to COVID, but there is an appeal process because there was a lot of folks that were other than honorable with the COVID shot situation. They have walked that back. So that I know that probably has happened to a lot of folks. If you had other than honorable as a reservist, that is being walked back kind of quietly. I've had a couple of people just pop up with eligibility who were separated, but they are taking back some of the other than honorable reservist discharge narratives.
Just like typically what they try. So what you're saying is, and have you been saying, is they're trying to do the best to assist us. So even in this point, when they're having this other than honorable, they're still trying to assist us to the best. So the VA is hands
They
down.
tried, yeah. So I went to the VA Lenders Conference just to step off for a second, and the entire Department of Veterans Affairs for the Home Loan Production Department is probably 60 to 70% veterans. The chief VA appraiser is a Marine veteran. One of the heads of one of the regional loan centers was a Navy veteran. Got to talk to him. There was a ton of veterans that I got to meet who are all in top positions. The director is also a veteran, and they all really care. They want to see veterans be able to use this benefit to get into a home because, hands down, this is the best loan option. It is the most flexible of all of the loan programs. Like, if you put them side by side and say, what are the requirements to use this? This one has the least amount that holds back people from buying homes.
Okay, so you've answered many of my questions, like within the question. So I'm gonna pull one from my buddy, Sergeant First Class Johnson. He says, yeah, he's in Germany. He's overseas. So his question is, when are veterans going to be able to utilize the VA loan overseas?
They're not, unfortunately, but you can
right?
use it in any of the US or US territories. So you can build in Guam or buy in Guam. Um, I'm going to show off my bad geography skills. I think Puerto Rico is a US territory.
Territory, yes.
Yes. All right. So you can do it in Puerto Rico as long as it's US or US territories. You can't use it in Germany. But what I would suggest, because this is a fun fact that I don't think a lot of people know, if you served in an Allied Forces military, or if you were in the Canadian Royal Army or any of their divisions for their amount of service times, your VA loan benefit, if they come to the States, they're eligible for a VA loan based on their service in another country's military. So I would check with whatever the Germany real estate requirements are and see if your service translates. I was surprised to find out that somebody that served in like the Israeli army for a certain amount of time was eligible for a VA home loan here.
Mm.
That blew my mind.
So these are things that you wouldn't know unless you're in the pamphlet, right? Safe
Right.
to say?
Well, that one,
Or
that one's probably going to be the Germany pamphlet, but
oh, okay, but some sort of reading that they can it's accessible, right? It's not based on, hey, I just experienced this and no one knew about it.
right. Now I'm going to Google it and I'm going to email you later so you can send it to him because now I'm curious because this is how I find, this is why I do TikToks is people will ask questions and that's a great question.
I kind of read the same thing that you said. You can't do it up until now, but I'm pretty sure maybe in the future, if it happens, it might be a possibility. But as of right now, yes, that's the same thing I've read the U.S. territories and the states. So, transferring over to the loan process, like how does it work and how long does it take?
Oh, let me finish going through the COE. I forgot we
Oh,
had not more to it.
okay.
Um, okay, yeah, let me go back to this. All right, so walking through the COE, and then I'll drop the screen. So your entitlement code over here, this tells me right off the bat what branch of service or how long you've been in. Excuse me, let me back up. When you served. Entitlement code 10 is Gulf War era, and then as the numbers decrease, that's when you serve. So when we start getting back to 4 and 5, that is an 89-year-old veteran that you're talking to, and they probably served in mess this up Vietnam. I don't think there's very many of those guys left. I've seen only two of those, and then starts getting into the wars after that. And I'm terrible with history too, so we're just going to skip up to entitlement code 6, which is for surviving spouses. Entitlement code 5 is reserved for your second time use. So this is a first time use entitlement code. 5 means you've used it a second time or you're using it a second time because it is reusable, just like a towel. Just, you can continue to use it, just take care of it. And then 11 is for anybody that's post 1997 entry, which just makes me feel old at this point.
Same here.
Branch of service, whether or not there is a funding fee, no SC combined percentage is no service connected combined percentage, is what that means. If you have a rating of 10% or more and you are compensated for at least 10%, you will not pay your VA funding fee. So if anybody closes on a home as an active duty service member or as a veteran without a funding fee, or excuse me, I'm sorry, without a disability rating, you're going to have a funding fee, which is it goes back to the VA home loan program and it helps administer the benefits for other veterans. And it's what keeps the entire department of this part of the VA running is funding fees. But you don't have to pay those if you have a service connection. Another thing I'll bring up, if you file for a service connected disability prior to closing on a home loan that's a VA home loan, and you had a funding fee, and then that same intent to file's disability rating gets approved for at least 10% or more, you will get your funding fee back and they will credit it to your loan amount.
Jeez, it's kind of like, why not use your benefit? Just
Yeah, they stack together pretty nicely sometimes. I mean, I would say, yeah. Okay, so going on to it, if you had a loan previously or if you have a loan currently. So if you were to pull your COE, you're going to see a loan number in this category, state, and then it's going to have the loan amount from what the loan closed at, whether or not it was the purchase of the home or if you refinanced it. The loan that started is going to be there, the date, and then how much entitlement was used and status. So open, active. If people have had foreclosures, short sales, deed and lieu, it would also show up here, and it's going to show a compromise. Now, the total amount of VA benefit that you get when you are using it, if you are using it for the first time or you have all of the entitlement available, there is no limit to the maximum loan amount. But let's say you bought a house for 250,000, and this is where the math gets a little screwbally.
mm-hmm.
Also, just ignore this number. This is from 1944, 43, whenever they launched the program, and homes weren't more expensive than 150 grand. Obviously, that's not the case in this economy. I wish. So ignore this because this is just your base level entitlement, and you have a whole bonus level of entitlement that isn't properly displayed on your COE. So everybody sees this and they're like, oh my God, it says zero. No, that's not how that works. That is just your basic. So let's assume and do some math. Let's say you bought one house for 250,000, and this will lead into another one of your questions, I'm sure. So let's say you bought a house for 250,000. The loan level price, I'm sorry, the conforming loan limit is now going to come into play. So for conventional loans, there's a maximum loan amount of 726,200 before it turns into a jumbo loan. That is where that threshold for how much VA loan you have between multiple houses is now going to come into play. So you're going to take your current house, we're assuming it was 250, you're going to back it out of 726,200, and you still have 476,200 dollars to spend with no down payment with the rest of your VA loan benefit. Once you've charged it once, it gets a total value of 726,200 minus whatever you've used, unless you sell those properties. If you sell those properties, you get your VA entitlement back. If the title changes to a new ownership and it's paid off, you get your entitlement back. If you keep that house and pay it off, your VA is still tied to it. You get one time to restore it. So if you buy 3 houses, you can restore one if all 3 are owned by VA, and you pay this one off. That got real convoluted real quick, but just remember, total of 726 if you're splitting it between multiple properties.
And that'll all stay tracked.
Yes, it logs itself on here, and then it has issue dates if you had a funding fee. This box down here is really important to pay attention to, especially for active duty service members, because we have to do several things when you're closing on a house that are VA related, one of which is the alive and well. We have to have somebody higher up than you tell us, especially if you are deployed, that person is alive and well. Most of the time, those folks are signing with a POA or a spouse back home. We need to be able to call somebody, I don't care if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and say, go poke him, make sure he's still breathing. We cannot close on a loan for somebody that is not here with us anymore on this plane. So it will tell us and give us directions. Sometimes this will also have other instructions depending on what your circumstances are. Some people have special processing requirements. That means that the VA has to review it depending on their situation. Pay attention to the conditions, because this is the conditions of you being able to use it. This is pretty standard. Veteran is not exempt. If you paid a funding fee at the closing of your home, and it was prior to your closing date that you got your effective rating, you may be eligible for a funding fee refund, and says to call this number. This is the number I call when I have a question to the VA. So that is the good number. Keep it saved.
So it tailors to your situation when you start filling that document out. Okay.
Yes.
And as you're doing that, how long is that all of that information? How long does that process take for the VA loan?
Yes. Okay. So what I tell all the people that I talk to, every single veteran that calls me, start the process 120 days before you want to close on a home. Like if you are dead set and determined, say, I want to buy a house, this is the game plan, you should be talking to a loan officer at least 120 days prior to when you're aiming to close on a home. Because the way I do it, not everybody does it this way, but you can ask your loan officer to only soft pull credit. That way you can see, do I qualify for this home? There is also a couple of other resources, and I'll send them to you, but I'm going to share this one because this is a good tool just to get an idea for people. Like if they don't know if they're ready to buy a home and they're not sure if they have enough money coming in, whatever it is, this is the best tool that I would suggest them to look at and plug numbers into before they start that 120-day process. So if you're getting ready to buy a home or you're not even sure if you qualify to buy a home, know what your credit score is. And then I'm going to share this link with you. This is the actual VA residual income worksheet. We'll run through a simulation, let's say Family Smith, and it's a family size of 2. And they want to buy a house for $250,000, or they think that's what they qualify for. 250 is a safe number to start at, just because eventually that should be around where the median sales prices of homes come back down to. They're raising rates to get sales prices lower. It's not really working, but here's for hoping. So let's assume active duty, E4, and homemaker for income. So it's about 5484 in income monthly. Now, right now, interest rates sucks unequivocally. We're going to use a 6.5.
Okay.
You're going to plug that in there. Payment factor from the P&I chart. You're going to come over here and find 6.5 on a 30-year fixed, and we're going to use a 6.32, and that calculates out to just about exactly what principal and interest, like what you owe the bank every month. Your mortgage payment, principal and interest is $1,580. Depending on where you are, you're going to plug in taxes and homeowners insurance. Texas is expensive, so we're going to use 285 for taxes. We're going to use about 150 for insurance, which is about average. HOA dues will not be included with your mortgage payment every single month, but you do need to account for them if you have them. And then you're going to go plug in all the stuff, like you can pull up credit card. How much is my car payment? $500. Cool, fantastic. I have about, let's say I put $200 a month towards my credit cards. This one right here is very, very, very important. Childcare expenses is probably the number one thing that can screw up a VA loan that cannot screw up any other loan program, because this is what the VA requires you to have at the end of the month. You have to meet residual income on a VA loan. That's why this is the most important and the easiest to kind of tell, can I afford a house right now according to what the VA's rules are? If you have childcare for $1,200 a month, you're going to need to tell us, because we're going to check bank statements and we're going to look. If we see a deduction for childcare, we have to count it according to the VA, because childcare expenses are really freaking expensive.
Yeah, they are.
So, but let's assume we don't have any kids here. Let's assume we have, maybe we'll just throw an installment loan on here for 184. If you have anything else, not including like the Affirm 6-month things, those don't have to be included. Anything that's really reporting on credit needs to be here, times the square footage of the home. This is accounting for your utility bills. So the VA wants to know you can afford based on utilities. You're going to go to your LES. You're going to pull off what your taxes are. Your home of record is where you're getting taxed for. So if your home of record doesn't require taxes, then, or state income taxes like Florida, you do not have to make up a number and plug it in there. Just leave it as a 0. So now at the very end, it's going to say, this is how much money this family has, $1,657. This is how much they need, and how you get to how much they need is you go to the third tab. We said that they were in Texas, which is going to be here, south. We're going to come over to these two tables. If it's less than an $80,000 loan, you use this one. If it's over, you use this one. So family size in the south, 738 is what this family needs. This family has enough money coming in to afford a home.
Really?
So now,
Wow.
yep. So that's what the VA uses. This is the debt to income that this family has on paper. It should match up to the actual loan application that they fill out. This one is going to tell us as well that they need to technically have, like, we get into some technical math and we add a little bit to this, essentially as a buffer. But this exact calculator is the reason that the VA loan program has the lowest percentage of foreclosures. That, along with their loss prevention program, VA does not want veterans or active duty families to lose their homes. They will take a metric shit ton, excuse my French, of prevention measures to avoid a veteran losing a home. So this, I will make this available. It's also linked in my link tree on my TikTok so that you can go download it and do this yourself. This is a great tool to start before, to know, do I make enough to even qualify for a home? Yes. Yes, you do, Mr. Smith. You sure do. And that's where we get into detailing in where you're looking and, what the game plan is. So that's where the 120 days starts. We're going to look at credit. We're going to look at income. We're going to look at assets. Fundamentals, nuts and bolts, in the most 11 Bravo way possible. Buying a house takes 6 pieces: credit, income, assets, inspections, homeowners insurance, title work. So we start with the first 3 things for you before you start house hunting, having that conversation on timeline, cash to close. What do you want the payment to be? What are you comfortable with spending? What are your hard limits when it comes to buying a home that you don't want for your loan? You may qualify for a payment of $3,000, but do you want to pay $3,000 a month? No, then I need to know that before you start looking at houses, because I will tell you, don't look more than this purchase price. That way you don't wind up going, oh my God, I love it, and the payment's $3,000 a month. It also depends too on a couple other things, but that's the nuts and bolts. Because that way your pre-approval and all of your documents are going to be good for 120 days. That's how long those documents are good for before we have to get new ones. You should be able to close theoretically without any problems. By the time you go under contract on a home, the only things that should be at risk is the appraisal, any inspections that you have to get aside from your appraisal, title work, homeowners insurance. None of those are things that you can really control if they go wrong. Some houses are just not in good shape.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. You just mentioned appraisals. What if it doesn't appraise to what I need it to appraise? I guess that's my question.
Then that's the conversation I have with my folks every time I pre-approve somebody is, as long as you don't screw up what I've already done in this pre-approval, the only thing that can screw up your loan is going to be the appraisal. And that's called Tidewater. So the appraiser goes out there, looks at the home, and they say, I don't think this house is worth what the veteran is about to pay for it. What I'm going to do is call you and tell you to stick your head between your knees and breathe deeply. You are not closing on time. We are definitely about to close late because the appraiser is about to put up a fight on what you're buying the home for. A lot of the times it comes down to appraisers not having access to enough data to compare the home to. Like they don't have enough other homes that are similar in nature. So I try and get ahead of that. If you're not buying in a cookie cutter neighborhood, make sure you have that conversation with both the lender and the realtor. Because once you get your pre-approval, you find a realtor that they're going to be the house hunters. You go do the house hunters thing with them. You call me for the numbers. I'm not going out with you. You go look at houses without me. I'm in my pajamas. They're going to take you to see the house. We're going to have a numbers conversation. I'm going to go back to the realtor and say, where did you find the value for the house that they're about to buy? Give me some evidence and some ammunition to fight the tidewater so that the appraiser can put the value where it needs to be. If you're buying for $250 and the appraiser says, nope, I still think it's only worth $240,000, here's your appraisal. That happens about 90% of the time. I don't get panicked when tidewater happens because I don't know what the appraiser is looking at yet. I need the data. So I will get the appraisal report, get with the realtors and say, here's the appraisal. What looks incorrect, if anything, on this appraisal report? So I'm going to pause, tell a short story, and come back to finish this up. I had an appraiser undervalue a home by $400,000. That same veteran that bought for 1.3, the appraisal came in at 900. And so I took the report to the realtor and we sat down, we went through it, and she just went through it with a highlighter, marking all the things that weren't correctly calculated. Not that were even incorrect, but the appraiser didn't even do the math right on the appraisal for adjustments. And it caused about $200,000 worth of the issues just because they didn't 1+1 correctly. And then we sent the rest of the revisions up to the VA. I wish I was kidding. And we said, hey, here is the data that supports the value. Here is what the appraiser said. Here's the reason these comps support the value. And the VA gave us back the other $200,000 in value with no problems. So as long as the house does have enough data to support the value, that is called a reconsideration of value after the tidewater. The VA gives value back on approximately 60% of all of no, it's more than that. I'm sorry. I want to say it was like 84%. And it's 0.01% that does not get value back through that process. So I think it was 60% get at least full value, and then like another 20% get partial value back by doing that.
Is that going to add on to
That is
time?
extending closing. Yep.
Okay. I guess a follow-on question to that. When you add on to closing cost, sometimes you get penalized. It all depends on what agreement you have. From what I've read, I don't confirm or deny. Like if you close 5 days afterwards, they can charge you an extra 30, 40, $100 a day. Is that true? And if it's true, does that apply to VA loans?
Builders will do that a lot because
Okay.
builders are dicks and they are
Love
the
it.
I don't have a nice way to say that. I have a cease and desist against 4 different DR Hortons. They can at me too. I can't stand them. Builders are very predatory and they will push you to use their lender and they will push you to close on certain dates to meet their deadlines. What you definitely need to do when you're working with a builder is pay attention to what the state contract rules are. So in North Carolina, our contracts come with an automatic 7-day extension from the closing date. So no, you cannot be charged some of that stuff. And sellers can be difficult, but if there's most of the time when a closing is moved, it's not really anybody's fault. Like nobody can control the appraisal coming in low. I tell everybody this is what's going on as soon as I find out that I have that news. I call everybody in the transaction, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, the closing attorney, the veteran, and I'm like, I need 2 extra weeks and I'm telling you this now so you guys can get me that paperwork before we're up against a closing date because I normally find out about 2 weeks before closing that we have an issue. I don't care that we still have 2 weeks. I need another 2 weeks. If we can close on time, I will. I need the extra time because I don't know how bad this is about to be. I'm a doomsday prepper. I don't want anybody to lose a house and I don't want anybody to be upset like at the last minute. Most of the time, the sellers are pretty acquiescent to moving closing, especially if it's something, again, above and beyond our control, or if there's a property repair issue or something that somebody caught that needs to get fixed. I tell everybody the easiest way to prep for closing on a home is don't book your movers, don't cut utilities on, don't make anything that's going to require you to call and reschedule it until after the appraisal and the inspections are back. Because if we have to move closing and you booked movers, well, yes, you better call and move that
Yeah.
because I'm not promising we're closing on time. I cannot promise that the VA is going to turn it in faster. So that's the only tough part is to just mentally prepare accordingly in case anything goes wrong. And if it doesn't, awesome.
Okay. So it can happen that you can be charged mainly on the builders. Check your contract and or the state's local requirements and
Check with your realtor. So
realtor.
right. So you get pre-approved. You get the money from me. You go shopping with them to make it very easy. They're going to take you to see houses. Ask them for things like that. What if the appraisal comes in low and we have to extend? Are there any penalties in our contracts? They should be able to educate on that. They are specifically trained to go through the contract. I know very high level rules. I don't get into the contract law itself. That is not my lane. Um, Here's your money. Come back with a contract. So that's how I treat it. I stay out of it unless you need numbers for that house. But your realtor is a huge resource there when it comes to knowing what the rules are for negotiating, what the rules are for extending. Um, the loan piece of it, as far as this is how much you need in closing costs, we work together on that. So you get your pre-approval, you find the house, you call me and you say, hey, Ariel, I need to know what the numbers are on this before we offer. Perfectly normal. I expect that. I would expect you want to know how much you're going to be spending for 30 years. Make that phone call. Don't feel like you're bugging your lender. That's what they're there for. Text address, whatever. Anyways, I'm going to work up the numbers specifically based on that property, pull that property's tax card, make sure that you know what the payment is, give or take within about $20, $25 before you offer. Then you offer, the seller signs, accepts, yay, you're under contract. Woohoo! Now is the stressful part because we do a lot of hurry up and wait. You're going to get 120 pieces of paperwork and you're going to e-sign 120 pieces of paperwork, have a lot of questions. I'm going to answer those questions. And then you're not going to hear from me because we're going to order the appraisal and my processor is going to start updating things. And we wait 10 days for the appraisal to come back. So you have that whole hurry up and wait. If there's no news, it's good news with the VA appraisal. They will just upload it and it's done. That means there is no tidewater. It may have repairs. Don't book anything for movers till after that point. You're also going to get a home inspection, which is not VA required. That is something that you still want to get. Almost every single state in the United States for buying a home is called a buyer beware state, which means that you as the buyer need to do due diligence on a home, including home inspections. If it has, it depends on where it is. The VA does require a pest inspection in most states, water tests on wells, and if it's a manufactured home, you still have to get a structural engineering report. So you want to double check and plan, are there any additional inspections you need once you are under contract? As long as all those inspections and appraisal come in okay and title work comes in normal, which is that's legal recording on how this house is recorded currently, how it's going to be recorded, your title insurance, homeowners insurance, all that goes back to underwriting. That whole process takes another week.
Fair enough. Holy. Okay.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
all of this, you're still letting them know, hey, we're at this point. You won't hear from me for a little bit. Once you do hear from me, we're going to be at this stage, safe to say.
Right. Well, and
Okay.
as the loan officer, once I start the loan, I have a team that takes over from the paperwork side of it because I'm not good at chasing down paperwork and I'm not good at reviewing paperwork. I'm really good at knowing all the rules. So the team handles that. If you hear from me, unless it's, hey, you're cleared to close, it's, hey, I have bad news, we have an appraisal issue. That at that point should be the only thing that can go wrong.
A lot of information on that. Very good information. You mentioned a couple of terms and what needs to happen. So I guess my next question is getting kind of like into the weeds. We purchase loans, like the difference of purchase loans, interest rate reduction, refinance loans, cash out refinance loans, the VA energy efficient mortgage rehab, and no, mortgage and rehab and renovation loans. Can you walk us down those like specifics, if you will?
Yep. Okay. So from a super high level, and then I can get into it based on which one, you've got questions about purchase. VA purchase loan is to buy an existing house in decent shape that you're going to live in. Very simple.
Okay.
Renovation loans are buying a house that you're going to live in after it's fixed. So it's broken, it needs fixed up, something's wrong with it, you just want to do improvements, you just want to update the 70s kitchen that's still in there, whatever the case is. You're going to live in it as soon as renovations are done. Again, primary residence, that's where you're going. The way that loan works is that you have to take a contractor with you to the home. The home has to appraise for the price the home is plus the cost of whatever the contractor is going to do to it. So if you're buying a house for 250, he's going to renovate another 50 grand. It needs to appraise for 300,000. You can't DIY those. Has to be a general contractor. Functions the same way. No down payment. little bit stricter on credit. Typically, you have to have a 620 or better to do a renovation loan. Then there's the VA one-time close construction to perm loan, where you're going to buy a piece of land with nothing on it, but we're going to spend 4 months chasing down blueprints, finding a licensed builder, registering the builder, picking out plans, picking out appliances. You're building a home, and then the appraiser is going to take those plans, look at those pictures, look at the land, and go, yeah, it's worth that. That's cool. You can do that. Appraiser stamps off on it. Now you're closing, and you're going to watch your VA loan let you build a home. It's going to convert into a standard 30-year fixed after that. That is the purchase options. There are supplemental purchase loans that can go along with your standard VA loan. Meat, potatoes. We're on the potatoes. The energy efficient mortgage is not worth it right now because it is meant to be for things like solar panels or upgraded HVAC systems, or you can use it for insulating. I think I don't know how much insulation is, but it's capped at 6,000, so it's not really enough to do anything with, unfortunately. Then there is the specially adapted housing grant, which is meant for disabled veterans who have certain disabilities, that things like amputees, anybody that has any kind of hormone irregulation that requires certain temperaments for their homes to be in, blindness. There's a list on the website that I can send you the link to. That is meant to make modifications to a non-built or existing home to make the home more accessible and more easily navigatable for a disabled veteran, including ramps and things like that for somebody that's in a wheelchair or has other needs for their homes. That grant is completely forgivable. You have to go through a VSO to get that. Once you've figured out if you're buying a home again or already own a home, you can use that at any point for improvements. Still requires a licensed GC bid, but that money is a grant from the government to make those changes. Um, Energy efficient, specially adapted. Which other ones am I forgetting?
Earl. Did we talk about Earl?
Not yet. So that's refinances. Purchase, you're buying, refinancing, you're doing something with your existing. So the interest rate reduction refinance loan is a special refinance option for veterans only or active duty service members only. It is meant to drop your payment. So the rate has to naturally fall by 0.5% from whatever it is that you locked in and closed at. So if you closed at a 4, rate needs to be a 3.5. For you to be eligible, you have to have made 6 payments, and a total of 210 days has to have lapsed from the time that you closed. So if you close in June, you can't do an EARL until January. But it's meant for when rates get better, especially if people are buying homes right now. Rates are expected to head back down to the high 5s, low 6s. So a lot of people will probably be doing EARLs around then. Great way to just save. There's no hard credit pull. We use a mortgage credit report. There's no appraisal. We don't need really any documentation from you to do them. It's 4 pieces of paperwork and they get done in 10 days. Very fast and easy way to lower your payment if you already have a VA loan. Cash out refinance is not going to lower your payment. Obviously, you're making your loan amount higher. So cash out refinance, you can pull up to 100% of your equity out of your home. With the VA loan, there is still no mortgage insurance, but you do have to get an appraisal and re-qualify for the loan, just like as if you were purchasing it the first time.
Hmm. Fair enough. Thanks for that insight. Let me ask you about transferring benefits. VA loan, does it extend to family members?
No. So it is for the veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran. And for surviving spouses, unfortunately, such a dark and sad topic, but the surviving spouse's late spouse has to have passed away from a VA service-connected disability and have been in receipt of VA disability income. And the surviving spouse has to be in receipt of DIC, which is dependent indemnity compensation, in order to be eligible to use the VA loan benefit. It does not transfer to children or any other extended family members.
Okay, so pretty much the spouse is the one that gets that benefit. Speaking of spouses, do you think it's a good idea when you have dual militaries for them to practice or employ the VA assumption loan?
I see it mostly used in dual military divorces. For purchasing, if it's 2 spouses and you guys both have eligibility, it depends. I'm a big fan of using one person's entitlement over another. Normally, when it's 2 married service members, you split and each person contributes a little bit of their VA loan. Assumptions can be used to purchase, but if you're selling a home, that actually might make it a little more complicated if you're both charging your entitlement to the property. Assumptions are, just to give context on what an assumption is, It can be done, and a VA loan can be assumed by another veteran or a civilian. Anybody can assume a VA loan once the VA loan is already on that property. I'm not a big fan of it when veterans don't know this. If you let a civilian assume that loan, your VA eligibility is gone forever. Point blank, period, end of story, even if that home is no longer on your credit and no longer in your name on the deed of trust. Because you
Say,
have it on
say
credit.
say that again. Say that again. Please repeat
If,
that.
if you let a civilian assume your VA loan, then you are losing the benefit forever. Point blank, period. At least that chunk of the benefit. So if you bought a house for 250, you've lost $250,000 worth of your VA benefit if you let a civilian assume it, because they don't have eligibility to use the program. From a federal standpoint at HUD, which is like Housing and Urban Development, all government loans have to be assumable, but there can't be restrictions on who can assume it. If that person qualifies to assume the loan from the veteran, they're allowed to do so. If it's a veteran assuming it from a veteran, there's an additional form that the VA requires from veteran number 2 who's assuming, that is the substitution of entitlement, where you essentially swap out the entitlement. So again, civilian, you lose the benefit forever. To another veteran, you get to maintain your benefit. So that's the big thing that I've seen happen when somebody didn't know and they let a civilian assume their loan. And we couldn't even track down who it was later on. Like, they don't record that, it's gone.
So you're not getting it back. That's it. Even if you find that individual, hey, I want my house back. I want my benefits back.
The only way is to cut a check directly to the VA for the amount of your entitlement.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah. And you know
probably
what?
not.
You can have this $300,000 so I can get that back. Yeah. Wow.
Well, technically, you only pay back the VA entitlement. So VA entitlement is always 25% of the loan amount. So if you financed a house for 250, then your VA entitlement is 25% of that. You'd pay the VA 62.5 to get back 250.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's still
Same
expensive, but
thing.
I understood now.
Yeah, it's easier. The VA will guarantee 100% of the loan, but the way they charge it to you guys is complete. It's like the Marines and the Air Force got together and had the most fucked up baby math they could ever make to do I don't care who gets mad
I love
at
it.
me. That is the most complicated math. That is honestly the most simple math. It is Marine Air Force math. So dumb.
Wow. All right. So, can you tell the audience about HELOCs and VA loans?
So the VA doesn't technically have a home equity line program. You can get a home equity loan on top of your VA loan, but it's typically going to be through a credit union. That's where I would always recommend if you're looking to get a home equity line. And a home equity line is essentially a massive credit card against your equity, is how it works. You can use it, pay it off, use it, pay it off. If you don't pay it off, it's interest only. And that interest only payment, if you just had the thing maxed out, is for interest only for typically 10 years. And then it's going to convert into a 30-year fixed note. So you're going to have one 30-year loan and one 10-year fixed. You have 130, which is your primary VA loan. And then you're going to have a fixed 10-year payment on your HELOC after you're done using it. It's not meant to be a forever line of credit. It's meant to be for home renovations, or if you have a large expense that you didn't have budgeted for in savings, but you have decent credit and you need that money pretty quickly and you know you're going to be able to pay it back in a solid chunk. That's what that's purpose is.
Fair enough. So, you're going to get into pretty much a 10 plus 30, 40-year agreement.
No, because the 10-year, like let's say you're in year 5 of owning that home, you take a HELOC out. It's open for the first 10 years, closed for the second 10 years, depending on the term. That line of credit term is 5 or 10 years typically.
Okay.
So it would still be paid off by the time you paid off your home if you maintain that home for the whole 30-year mortgage.
Okay. Understood. But the initial payment, you'll be paying down all the interest and then you'll go into the actual HELOC itself, right?
So when you open it for the first 5 to 10 years, it is interest only unless you pay additional. Then it
Okay.
converts into an amortized 10-year loan.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough. Because I'm kind of old, so I got to make sure that I
Yeah.
understand everything. All right. So
Well,
for
I'm
go
sorry, I'm
ahead.
going to say this because it makes a lot of sense to people. So a loan always will amortize, meaning that by the end of the term, it will be paid off. But it's a mortgage mullet. You're going to pay primarily interest in the front and principal in the back. So If you go to Google, and I'll send you the link for, I'm serious. It's
I
so
love it.
terrible. But people are like, how do I eventually, what is an amortization schedule? Like, that is a schedule of, if you make every payment on time for 30 years, you're going to see the principal slowly get larger and larger and larger. If you make extra payments, you're going to see that number, like how much interest you pay over the life of the loan. So I can send you a calculator to share. It's super useful because if you want to budget, hey, if I throw an extra 50 towards my mortgage every month, how much faster am I going to pay off my home and how much interest am I going to save? $100 a month typically saves you about 70 grand in interest on a $250,000 house and pays your mortgage off 8 years early.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that and
Yeah. Big numbers.
yeah, like a lot of times we just say real fast. A lot of times we'll say, you know what, it's not going to do too much. What's this extra $100 going to do? I rather spend it somewhere else, or I need it for something else. But when you put it in those terms in the long run, I think that's what we need to see as especially us in the military. Like we are a show me type thing. What state is that? I don't know what state is that. There's a show me scenario. I need to see it. I get it. You're telling me, but I need to see it. And if you show me, like you said, you have the document, everyone kind of like falls in line a lot easier.
Well, and if
And
once you know, you're like, oh, what's the purpose of this? Like, why am I doing this? Well, you're doing this to save yourself a metric shit ton of money, is what you're doing it for.
the math, when you hear it and see it, like when some, I can tell my soldiers all day long, right? But I'm not specialized in this. But when they hear it from you, they see it from you, it like it holds a lot more weight. Like, oh, Sergeant Cruz wasn't just BSing us. You know, we got someone who actually knows what they're talking about, that's showing us and telling us, and maybe I should just go ahead and take this $100 instead of going down to the Irish bar. I'll put it on my loan.
Yeah.
So for those of us who want to kind of like invest, if you will, when a lot of us hear this term of primary residence, and you can't get another home unless it's your primary residence. So let's say I'm down here in Texas, you know what, anywhere, and I want to, and I have a home, and I want to get into another home, but I've heard this primary residence thing. What does that mean? What does it mean by primary residence?
Well, it means your butt is sleeping in that house at night because you live there. So very simple. Primary first. That's where you live. That's where you park your truck at night. That's where you live. There's very simple. Primary means that's your primary place where you're dwelling and living. Second home is exactly how it sounds. That's your second home. You're going to go there every once in a while. You're allowed to use a second home as a vacation rental. Investment means that you're investing and you're not going to live in it. So those are the three different occupancy types. Now, what is the VA's rule on occupancy? You can search the entire handbook. There is not a minimum amount of time that you are required to live in a home that you have purchased with a VA loan. Point blank, period. It is not in the handbook. I actually got into, man, I got into it with some realtors about that because I posted a video. Some realtor was just like, it's a federal crime. And I'm like, you're not a licensed loan officer. So how about you shut up? Like, stop telling people things that are not true about VA loans. I get real pissy. So I did a video, and one of the guys at the VA, a couple of guys at the VA, they follow me on TikTok. I don't really engage with the VA on TikTok. I don't work for the VA. VA is very much a separate institution. I'm a loan officer with a big mouth on TikTok. But they do follow me and they'll watch some of my content sometimes. So I get this phone call, and the VA doesn't normally call me. I call them. So when I see the number ring, I'm like, oh shit, what did they see that I post now that they don't like? So I answer the phone, and it was funny because I had made a acquiescent follow-up post after my first video where I was getting pissed about this realtor talking about it, and somebody was like, well, technically this form, and I said, fine, I'll do a TikTok on that form. And the VA calls me and they said, Ariel, you were right the first time. There is no minimum amount of time you're required to live in that home according to the VA. It is not in the handbook anywhere. However, comma, the loan is backed by the VA. The lender gave you the money. So you got an agreement between you, the VA, and this lender. So if you sign something for that specific lender at closing that says you agree to live in the home this amount of time, typically it's 12 months. That's what like FHA and USDA for occupancy time as a primary is required. So most people go with the nice round 12 months. That sounds great on paper. There are exceptions they are required to give you for that 12 months. SCRA being number one of them. If you get PCS'd, obviously the government owns you. Just because the government also owns that house doesn't mean they're going to leave you in it. So I've had guys buy a house and 3 months later have a PCS order come through, and now you got to buy another house. So that is an exception. Medical job changes, there's lots of exceptions to the rule. You can't force somebody to live in a house just because you gave them the money for it if there's a change in their life circumstances. So for occupancy, VA has to start as your primary. You have to intend to occupy as your primary residence. That is what the handbook specifically says. You must intend to occupy the property as your primary residence within 60 days of closing. There are exceptions. Your spouse or your dependents are allowed to occupy on your behalf. So if you're stationed in Germany, your wife could be stateside and go ahead and buy a house as long as we have a POA. You don't have to be here. I got her. I just need to verify you're alive and well. Children can occupy. There's several circumstances where the VA will give exceptions to that, but they don't want people using it as an investment property until after they've lived in it. Now, that being said, you can use rental income and turn it into an investment property later. That is perfectly fine. You can leave your VA loan on it as an investment property once you've lived in it.
Fair enough. So there is a way to purchase with VA benefits, ultimately turning that property into some type of passive income.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I highly encourage service members who are still in to do that. That is a great way to build passive income and a rental portfolio while you're still in service.
Which leads me into my next question for you. The My first time purchasing, I'm single. Should I go for a single, townhome, or a quadruplex?
Fucking send it. Go for the four
Fucking
unit
said.
every time because here's the thing. I've seen enough LESs. I know what y'all make, and they don't pay y'all enough at all. It's ridiculous. Having one 4 unit property in your portfolio or in your investment portfolio, or whatever you want to call it, or just buying a 4 unit, you're going to live in one of the units. You know what people get paid for BAH around those duty stations. So, if you have 4 full 2-1 units, so you're buying a 4-door, each unit has 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a kitchen. The mortgage payment on that may be like $3,000, but the rental potential on that property is about $6,000. And if you don't like money, then why are you doing a multi-unit property is the first thing that I have to say.
Mm.
That's the maximum number of doors the VA will let you have. You're going to have a property manager that's going to rent. You don't have to have a property manager. Let me back up. You can get a property manager to manage the background checks, the rental agreements, all of that stuff. They normally take a cut of the total amount and then charge a one-time fee per contract. It is absolutely worth it to do that. If you're going to use your VA loan to invest, buy a 4 unit. You can use it to renovate a 4 unit if the 4 unit is not in good shape. So that's a great way to break into it, is to buy something that's a little older and needs some rehab, because you can roll in up to $100,000 worth of renovations and repairs to that property to get it turnkey, livable for other people. You live in 1 unit for a year, then you can move out and use the rest of your VA benefit. Because remember, you can use it on multiple houses. The total of houses is 726,200 across multiple properties. So if you can find 2 or 3 and fit it into 726,200, you could theoretically have a 4 unit here, another 4 unit here, depending on where you're stationed, and use either the rest of your VA loan for a primary once you're out, or buy another multi-unit. And if you have 4, 8, 12,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, at $1,300 a month BAH times 12, what is that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's retirement. That is
That's
you being able to exit service without having to rush to find a civilian job, without having to push to get your VA disability benefits. And if you didn't serve enough time and you do not have retirement, it's a great landing cushion. Plus, if you wanted to move back to any of those areas and explore the area and find jobs, now you have an anchor point for each of those areas.
Listen up, knuckleheads. 4 doors. You heard it from the VA lady. She said, "Fucking send it."
Yeah.
She's
I And then short-term rentals. I have several veterans doing this, and I forgot to tell you this yesterday. So I have a veteran building up in the mountains. Have you seen those dome homes, like with the
yes,
glass
with the
panels? I have a veteran.
yeah.
He's building 4 of those for Airbnb, and the Airbnb potential from just that property is somewhere around 15 grand a month.
Jesus.
Like, just that one property.
Yeah.
He's not using all of his VA eligibility either.
Mm-hmm.
So one property is going to net 15 grand.
And that's gonna cover pretty much everything. And if he's
Yeah.
building 3, I can do this math. 15 times 3, 45,000.
No, so just that one parcel of land.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fair enough.
They're renting, yeah, for that one parcel, but he has enough left over to build a second one of those. So now you're at 30 grand a month. And realistically, that's, I mean, we're clearing six figures real easy with that.
That's all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah, right. So it is a great way if you're going to strategically plan to do it, start early, get a multi-unit, or if you're not ready to jump straight to multi-unit, stick with a single family. That way you just know what home ownership is like. Because owning a home sucks sometimes. Stuff is going to break.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know,
So
but
get your
you
feet
can
wet.
learn music. Yes.
Okay. All right. Last question. How do I know I'm dealing with a good VA lender?
The questions that I would ask is how many VA loans have you done in the past year? Ballpark is fine. If they say anything less than five, run like hell. The exceptions to that rule is if you call any one of the big lenders. And we didn't get into it, but let me explain overlays. Overlays is what a lender can put on the VA loan program as they are administering it that are not VA requirements. So Veterans United requires a 620 credit score. I had a veteran clear to close yesterday on their home purchase with a 522 FICO. VA doesn't have a minimum credit score. Point blank, period, end of story. The VA doesn't have a lot of the rules that some lenders will put in place. So if it's one of the big box lenders like them, know who you're working with and know that you are going to be subject to their rules. Past that, if you're working with somebody who is not, again, box lender, how many VA loans have you done in the past 12 months? How many Tidewaters have you dealt with? And who do you typically work with, like for real estate agents in your area? I say vetted VA, everybody that's in vetted VA on a real estate side has taken some seriously intensive testing. If you're shopping for a lender outside of that, just ask them how many VA loans they've done in the past 12 months. Anything less than five, and they haven't seen enough things to be aware of every single thing that could come up with a VA loan. And they may screw it up. And I'm not trying to fault anybody. Everybody's got to start somewhere. But realistically, I wouldn't want to risk my benefit with somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
So at least 5 loans, at least bare minimum, has has full grasp of Tidewater because that's going to push more right than left for
Right.
and there's paperwork involved and just general experience, safe to say.
That was the other thing.
Oh, really?
Ask them if any of those veterans they've assisted would be willing to share a review of them. I got veterans that I've worked with that will give me rating reviews, and I've got veterans that I've worked with where I texted them, "You're cleared to close, lose my number." But you know what? You got your house.
Yeah, I
You
got
got
it.
your house. You are welcome, sir. That's what I have to say to you. Good
Yeah.
luck, Godspeed. Enjoy life.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me again.
Ever.
So but I admit that. I will tell you there are people I've closed loans for that we did not get along with. I did not close them very peacefully. It was a little tragic and it happened and it's done now. Talk to my therapist about it later. But a large number of the veterans that I work with would say that I will be very honest with you and I will get it done if I say I can get it done. Not all lenders have that experience and they may not have those reviews. And again, I'm not trying to plug myself, but you really, really don't want to risk spending money on something that isn't worth it and isn't going to go well because you put money down when you buy a house. You have to have a deposit, even if the seller's paying closing costs. You don't want to just active duty families don't have $2,000 to blow. There's no easy way for me to say that. You guys are all on salary and you don't have that kind of access to funds to just blow on contract after contract if the realtor and the lender aren't doing their job correctly. And it's not fair to you guys to not tell you, look for specialists. Vetted VA is a great place to start. VA doesn't endorse anyone in particular, so it can be very hard, but ask for your battles reviews on people they have worked with to buy a home. Did you have a good experience? Did you have a bad experience? What went wrong and how did they fix it? How did they communicate it to you? Did they let you know? Did they leave you hanging? Those are the things that you want to know.
Fair enough. Well, it's a lot. Luckily, it's recorded and we're going to push it out. Ariel,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. I just have to say, you're very genuine, driven, and friggin' knowledgeable. Like any question that I spit, I even spit 2-3 questions that came up along like in the chat or just popped into my head, and she's on it. And obviously, if she's putting it out there, is because she knows about it, right? Wouldn't just put crazy stuff out there. That'd be weird because everyone has Google, right? So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Your knowledge, your time. For those of these guys that are living under a rock, where can they find you?
TikTok is probably the fastest way. It's VA Lone Lady or that one damn ginger. Either of those handles. My handle before I started doing TikToks was that one damn ginger, and I was just like, I'm not getting rid of this. Keep it.
Okay.
So,
Oh my God.
TikTok and YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I have a Facebook, but best way is probably TikTok. That's where I started with most of my content, and that's where I go live most often. So,
All
but
right,
yeah,
fair.
I'm be on here. I'm glad you had me. I had fun.
Thank you so much. All right, guys. We'll let you go, Ariel. You enjoy your day. Make sure you get your lawnmower back.
Well, all right. I'll talk to you later.
Take care and thank you.
No problem. Bye.
Bye bye. All right, guys. I hope you guys got some value out of this. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you didn't see the entire recording, I'll be dropping it on YouTube. The next thing is I'll be dropping it on a podcast about a couple weeks from now. So you'll have multiple avenues of approach. If you guys have any suggestions or want any questions answered or want me to interview anyone in particular in a particular field, just go ahead and email me at rogersarnt@gmail.com. And go ahead and do me a favor. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, you don't have to embrace the suck if you got the right tools in your ruck. I'm Sarn First Class Cruise, and I'm out.
Rogersarnt.